Well, for me, it was a massive subject jump from a more experiment oriented subject like psychology and a more reading oriented subject like culture studies. So it was, in many ways, a completely new space to occupy with new expectations and new norms and rules to play by. So, for one, it's been rapid change. For another, it's been an enjoyable space, one where I can juggle all kinds of concepts, ideas, and subjects that aren't necessarily defined by the disciplines they belong to, but the questions I need answered. Professionally, I've had the chance to look at the work of and work with several professionals, be they scholars or practitioners at IIHS. For instance, I'm right now working on a project for health insurance provisions and their potential adequacy for platform workers under Aditi Suri. Urban studies in any shape or form is completely new to me. Everything anyone had to say had the potential to add to me. For instance, we have what you would expect, the kind of people you'd expect to show up based on their specialization in the UFP, architects and planners, their technical expertise, their understandings of building norms and regulations. That was something new for me. It was a different, more concrete lens on exactly how urban space is transformed. I've also worked with people who are trained in economics and political science who have a different perspective. That felt closer to consultancy and problem to problem solving approaches. I've also met doctors, photographers, journalists, and seen how they respond to what the UFP has to teach. So almost everyone, both with their disciplines and their personal experiences and outlooks, had something new to tell me about on how to take the UFP in. The first half was the commons term, which was a very useful introduction to the vocabulary of when you're beginning to think about Indian urbanism. So we were introduced to identity and social practice, the kinds of divides, connections, and rules it creates in urban spaces along lines like caste. We saw urban infrastructure where we understand that a repeating trait of Indian cities is that we deal with scarcity and we have to constantly think about how we distribute limited resources and we account for the concept of leakage or wasted infrastructural resources. So that was for me a grounding in what a city can be broken into, what are its basic elements. And through the electives terms, I got to pick areas I would like further insight on, such as certain urban theory, which is an attempt at looking at more abstract thinking and the connection between this abstract thinking and direct practice in cities' problems, urban and regional economic development, which introduces us to thinking about what do you call it, financing and the understanding of space and how space can actually be social relations rather than what do you call it, geographical movement, and the governance of mega infrastructure projects, which not only tells us about the larger paradigms a country and its urban spaces are in the middle of, but also the many players besides the government that show up. So for me, yeah, each from the basics to the specializations, each has helped me develop my own idea of what a city is, what it should be like, and what part of it I'd like to contribute to. If I had to name one aspect of the UFP as its most efficient, as its most impressive or appealing to me, I'd say that it is the teaching. I do not know how they pull it off, but the faculty at UFP are genuinely some of the most capable teachers I have ever worked under. It doesn't matter what degree you had, what training you had, what research you've done before, they found a way to make you cover the distance required to understand what they needed you to understand. More than pedagogical problems, the only real issue I see with UFP's teaching might be language barriers and getting your way around English. So I think they're extremely capable. I think the way they walk us through their own work, through their own interests, make them all the more better. Because this is something that is educational to students and something faculty themselves tend to be passionate and invested in. In many ways, it was transformational for me. It wasn't just a subject jump, it was a change in the way I would think about whatever research project or research specialization I would want to pursue next. The way I seek out information, facts, theory, the way I interpret my surroundings. It doesn't matter if I move away from urban thinking, urban studies, urban practice after this. The way I structure, interpret, and respond itself has been changed, and in my opinion, for the better. I've learned to work on a team that has different specializations and backgrounds to them. So it's a more varied team. When I was studying psychology, we'd be psychology students lumped into groups to work on a particular common deliverable. But it's a very different experience when there's multiple disciplines, and therefore multiple perspectives and interests involved. So multidisciplinary teams, that was one big skill I picked up through the collaborative projects we've had. The use of geospatial information was one of the biggest benefits I've had from the skill labs. It's a whole new method, a whole new approach to thinking or even explaining any kind of urban phenomena. I mean, I don't even know how to describe the way it changed my perspectives on research methods and presenting issues when I first got to work with GSL methods. They tend to be very short, so they're packed with information. The faculty are very efficient in the way they give out leads that we can follow on our own. If we're interested in a topic, we can go after them, and they've almost always, in my experience, been fantastic leads. But yeah, I always end up wishing that things would go on for longer, and I get the feeling the faculty too wish they could get to engage with us for longer. The integrative case week was an incredible experience. We had some really great faculty like Amog who took us to various spaces, explained how what do you call different concepts from the commons can be brought together in the process, both on the ground and in the classroom discussions. In a sense, it was training to actually think interdisciplinarily, and it was pretty effective training at that. I think it's a deeply beneficial program in the sense that it primes you for just new modes of thinking and practice. It skills you in thinking, writing, and researching in some truly fantastic ways. I think its application goes past just looking at Indian cities. I think in many ways it resembles a research methods course at the college level, but a very advanced one due to its sheer length and all the work across different subjects and issues it makes it do. So I think for most students who are looking for a serious upgrade to their thinking, to their output skills, I think the UFP is fantastic. And as far as I can tell, it strives to be contemporary as well in terms of the material, the readings, and the projects that we are walked through by our faculty. Life at IHS is quite rewarding. We get to run into our faculty quite often. Most discussions with them are enlightening in one form or the other, be they in the classroom, be they on our own terms. The library here is an incredible support infrastructure for our students. Not only do they have a great selection already and a number of login accesses to some really great services, they also have the ability to procure new text for us as our work might require. Makes the library an incredibly enabling part of the UFP experience. I think more than at Stanza, the process of coexisting and being amongst each other has been done more at IHS. It's through the classroom, it's through running into each other while we're getting coffee, while we're working, and wherever we can find space. We get to catch up on our work, we get to talk about whatever problems we're dealing with right now, our next moves, so on and so forth. I think in many ways it's not necessarily inspiring, but it's conducive. It makes you want to chase after whatever you're doing more when you see people being passionate or invested in their own work. We met a civil service officer a few months ago. It was facilitated by Professor Divya. That was actually a pretty intriguing experience on not only how nutrition research schemes and provisions are taken care of in particular regions of Maharashtra, but also in terms of how research scholars can be seen. So she spoke of how, from time to time, people would come from the city, researchers, thinkers, academics, whatever, and they'd start dropping ideas and requests on her heads. It was it was a fascinating change in perspective. As researchers, we often see ourselves as unilaterally helpful or beneficial, but here we can actually be an impeding factor to the work of the bureaucracy, among other factors, of course. The office hours at the UFP are really helpful because we get to talk about almost anything that we'd like with the faculty who've opened themselves up. It could be our internships, it could be the project we're doing right now, it could be theoretical problems that we have. Um, the sheer openness of doing whatever you want at the office hours is what makes it so beneficial. And in my experience, at least, I've always come off better informed from my office hours with the faculty I've engaged. So yeah, I think it's as important a support infrastructure as something like the library at the UFP.